Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. Somehow I need my glasses at home, my reading glasses, but I don't need them in our studio. What's that all about?
It's about the bright lights and the pink gel.
I guess that's it. And my hair's getting longer and therefore flatter. Let's see, it's all I care about.
And I haven't grown a beard. I have not grown a beard since the year 2000 when they couldn't settle the election between Trump and Gore. I got depressed and I just wouldn't shave. And that lasted for a couple of months, but I don't know if I'm going to keep this kind of scrappy.
I'm against it, but our viewers may feel differently.
I look like Gabby Hayes. Anyway, we start with...
I think it ages you. That's my objection to facial hair.
Okay. I'll get rid of it for next week then.
Viewers can weigh in also.
Okay. Well, we're going to weigh in on what Dr. Anthony Fauci said today about an AIDS drug shortening the recovery for people with COVID-19 in a preliminary study.
There are a lot of details to this study, some pros and cons. We'll fill you in with what we know at this moment. Meanwhile, as we often say on this show, President Trump is set to legalize discrimination against LGBT people in healthcare. He's been threatening this for a long time, and now we're in the home stretch for him doing it.
Heinous. Among those we lost this week, AIDS activist Deloris Dockrey, the gay author Seymour Kleinberg, and a PFLAG activist mom, Willy Jump.
And terrible news from Puerto Rico, where 3 trans women have been murdered in the last week or so.
There was a study out from the Department of Defense that said most troops experience sexual harassment on the job, but it's much higher against LGBTQ troops.
In San Francisco, at the airport, the Harvey Milk terminal, which is a phrase I'm not crazy about, but the long-awaited Harvey Milk terminal has opened at the airport in San Francisco.
And speaking of terminal, Harvey Milk's nemesis, State Senator John Briggs, has died at the age of 90.
And there are a couple of new Ryan Murphy productions out. One of them is Hollywood, a series premiering on Netflix about life in Hollywood post-World War II. And since it's Ryan Murphy, it, of course, is very gay inclusive.
So, we look for rays of hope, and we're sitting here watching television on Wednesday morning, and from the Oval Office, there's Dr. Fauci sitting there with the president and all these other people, none of whom are wearing masks. And Dr. Fauci says, and take it from there.
Okay, I'm going to take it back a notch. We have heard for some weeks about remdesivir, a drug that people thought might have some efficacy against COVID-19. It's a drug that has been used against HIV in the past. And the general principle here is that you have a virus that infects the body. A little bit of the virus gets into your body through mucous membranes, your nose, your mouth, your eyes, your vagina, your anus. We learned in AIDS that those are all mucous membrane targets for viruses. So the coronavirus gets into your body, and then it starts to reproduce out of control. It just takes over your body more and more, and in this case, evidently quite fast. HIV is much slower, COVID-19 much faster. So we're always looking for drugs against viruses that will stop that reproduction or slow it down. And remdesivir appears to be a drug now that has some usefulness in slowing down that reproduction. There are a number of studies that have now begun to produce results. And remdesivir, by the way, is a Gilead drug. Yay, more money for Gilead. I mean, we've been fighting them for years on Truvada. But the study, Gilead did some of its own studies. And Fauci's government organization, NIAID, the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, has done studies they've sponsored around the world. And here's what they've all found out. Remdesivir seems to help about half the patients it's given to, not all. And it doesn't kill the virus. It's not a cure. But what it does is it helps people get better faster. It ameliorates the effect of the virus.
The stat that he cited was that it reduced the recovery time from 11 days to 15 days. Oh, excuse me, from 15 to 11 days for the people who took it. And the reason they're announcing this so preliminarily is they didn't feel it was justified to have the people in the control group who were getting the placebo not to get the drug.
Some of these studies were placebo studies, some were not. The Gilead studies, for instance, studied a 5-day course of the drug versus a 10-day course of the drug. And not entirely surprisingly, and in line with things we have been discussing for the last week or two, the shorter course worked better. Much like we found eventually with AZT that less of it worked better than more. More was more lethal. Remdesivir works better as a 5-day drug than a 10-day drug. They had better outcomes with 5 days. So that's one of the results of the Gilead studies. Now, hold on one second. It diminishes the time to recover. Fauci said it should be considered the standard of care at this point. But what he also said is, like with HIV drugs, we started to produce drugs, and AZT really was the first official drug. But eventually we got better and better drugs over time. So remdesivir may be the standard of care right now, but what Fauci said is that as we go along, we will produce better drugs. What we have done here is confirm the proof of concept. And the proof of concept is that you can use a drug like HIV drugs that interfere with the reproduction process of the virus in your body. In this case, interfering with an enzyme in the drug, in the virus. The best drugs against HIV are the protease inhibitors. And what protease inhibitors means is literally you are inhibiting the reproduction of protease in HIV. So let's see. He talked already about adding a monoclonal antibody to remdesivir to see if that combo drug could improve performance, as we learned that HIV drugs worked better in combination as we went along. Also, we learned that early treatment is better, that remdesivir works best to help patients who are treated earlier in the course of their disease. Now, this is a horrible dilemma because we have, in the last couple of months, refused to test people for the virus until they were in the worst stage of their disease. First of all, we don't have enough tests. We don't have tests that are reliable. And they didn't want to have a mixture of people in these wards that didn't have the virus with those who did. But what we learn here, as we learned with HIV, is that treating people earlier makes for a better outcome. So now we're going to have to figure out how we test people earlier in the course of their disease, be willing to look at the symptoms they're having, and be willing to give them a test as we improve the tests and make them eligible for treatment.
It doesn't help that the FDA has been letting some of these companies self-certify on the effect on whether their tests work. I mean, it's insane.
You wonder why we had an AIDS movement at all when they're still doing this kind of thing. Frankly, I was not entirely thrilled with the idea that Fauci was doing placebo trials on this still, because Gilead proved this without them. But anyway, this is wonderful news, but it is only a first step, and there's a long way to go. And as we said at the top, 50% of patients are not helped by this drug. So it is a small step, but a good one. Fauci
said he's very optimistic. Now, stop me if you don't want to talk about this. But did you hear what Montagnier has been saying about this virus? Luc
No, I
Montagnier?
did not.
Well, Luke discovered HIV before
Yes.
Americans in Gallo. He says, to me, there's no question this is a manufactured virus. It has elements of HIV. It was done in a lab. And, but he's trying to offer this as a way of, like, if you want to get at it, you've got to look at what it really is and where it came from. But that's out there now.
Well, that also leaves open the question, was it deliberately manufactured and injected, or was it something that happened and escaped from the lab in some way? And that's, I don't know the answer.
Right.
And I never thought it was important, really, to figure out the source of HIV, although I believe it occurred naturally in nature and moved from animals to humans. And I just don't know. The point is, what are we going to do about it?
Speaking of animals, what are we going to do about our cats and our dogs and our minks and our tigers? I mean, seriously. And now we know that all those animals, at least, who have it, can get it. We don't know about transmission, but it's frightening.
Yes, it is. It's all frightening. And we should also say that there have been other studies of remdesivir that showed it having no effect on the virus. So the results are mixed.
And a footnote on this, there's a failing company named Jaguar Health that produces an diarrhea drug to treat the side effects of HIV medications. And they tripled the price in the last couple of weeks. Maybe they knew this study about say it again.
Remdesivir.
Remdesivir was coming out. So, but what happens with drug prices in this country and the fact that they never get under control is more than an outrage.
And Gilead, whatever price they put on this remdesivir, their stock price has skyrocketed on this news this week. Really, it's...
Well, that's what we always cautioned when we've ever done HIV stories, and I would bring them in sometimes and you would say, that's just a stock price story. They're just trying to boost their stock. I mean, come on, there's nothing there. We'll report it when we have something. But there was Dr. Fauci saying, I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, the difference here a little is that this is a phase 3 study on human beings. Phase 1 is always the safety of the drug. Phase 2 is the safety, efficacy. Well, there are 3 phases, but this is human trials. Sorry. Isolation is getting to me. But I heard someone the other day saying, well, what about this new drug? Because they tried it on monkeys and they're very close to human beings and it really worked on the monkeys. Does that mean it will work in human beings? And the answer is no. We've had hundreds of drugs that we tried on monkeys with HIV or SIV, the simian immunodeficiency virus, and it bears no relation to how it works in human beings. Or we tried it in we put the HIV in a test tube and tried drugs on it like Lysol and Clorox,
Yes.
and it worked in the test tube, but not in the human being. So the only thing you can really begin to rely on are human trials of these drugs.
If we run out of things to talk about, I have 12 things the president is not sarcastic about and 12 things he is sarcastic about.
I think we've done our drug story. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm just holding that.
I see. Okay. All right. So wait a second. Let's get a couple of other
COVID stories
here. Well, I guess it was after our show last week that Andy Cohen announced that he had been rejected for plasma donation after recovering from the virus. He went on his Watch What Happens Live show. You see him here giving his rant against the fact that as a gay man, he was rejected for plasma donation. So you add him to Lucas Estock, who we talked about last week. And then I got an email from a friend who said a coworker had recovered from the virus, gay man, also rejected for plasma donation. I think this has got to be a huge, huge story, and I just don't see enough about it around.
Well, it has been a huge story. I mean, they brought Lucas on Good Morning America, mainstreaming that story. Lucas posted on Facebook that Memorial Sloan Kettering invited him to donate his plasma. I don't know about this plasma. Plasma. All right. Okay.
So shouldn't we be putting pressure on the mayor and the governor to demand that hospitals here?
Do they respond to the mayor and the governor?
Well, some of them are private hospitals, some of them are public hospitals, and the public hospitals could certainly be pressured to invite gay men who've recovered from the virus to donate plasma, whether they were rejected by the blood banks or not.
The reticence of the blood banks to adopt these guidelines in the front, any guideline, is liability. They want to say, we followed the federal guidelines. Here are the federal guidelines. These federal guidelines, the new ones aren't going to go into effect for this month, so we're not doing it, et cetera. That's the issue. I mean, somebody said the same thing about opening up restaurants. The mayors, the mayors and governors can say, open up your restaurant, and then if people start getting sick at TGIF or whatever it is, they're going to sue. All right.
Well, I think if Sloan Kettering can make that request of Lucas Estock, that other hospitals could do the same.
Yes. Okay. So what else in COVID? By the way, first of all, it's the FDA and the Mayo Clinic who are overseeing plasma donations in particular. So if you have any sway with either of those, put pressure on them to accept the donation. Not to mention it to the vice president when he was going up there.
Exactly. Montefiore Hospital here in the Bronx is starting a study of plasma donations. So if you think you are a candidate for plasma donations, contact Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx and see whether they'll put you in their study.
Well, if we're going to say it, go ahead.
Trump. I know we'll talk about him continually. He has announced, his Office of Management and Budget has announced that the money he is suspending from the World Health Organization should be given to the Red Cross and Samaritan's Purse.
Oh my God. That's insane. It's insane. In New York, they've told the hospital ship to go away, and and the Samaritan's Purse, Franklin Graham's bigoted organization, still has their advertising tents up in Central Park. Now, Cuomo, everybody's big hero, he's appointed a 100-member reopening advisory committee. Zero representation from LGBT groups, AIDS service groups, and homeless groups. Although Ana Oliveira, who used to be the head of GMHC, who's now the chair of the board of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, is on it.
Is she?
But de Blasio put his bisexual wife, Shirlane McRae, as the head of a panel looking at racial disparities.
Okay. Big demonstration in Washington outside the Trump Hotel there. The Center for Popular Democracy, with our pal Jen Flynn involved there, put body bags outside the Trump Hotel, and with their slogan, "Trump lies, people die." I thought that was pretty dramatic and effective. So thank you to the Center for Popular Democracy for doing that. And thank you to Chris Johnson, reporter for the Washington Blade, who is a member of the White House Correspondents Association. The Washington Blade is the gay paper in D.C., and so he's been traveling with the president occasionally and doing stuff as a pool reporter sometimes. So he was designated as a pool reporter at a recent White House briefing with Trump and everybody lined up in the room there, the little press room. And the White House is so angry at CNN and other major networks that they asked Chris, who was seated in the back of the room, to switch places with a CNN reporter in the front row, and he refused. And the CNN reporter refused, and they said, look, the White House Correspondents Association assigns these seats. It is not up to the White House to arrange the seating, and we're not moving. And I thought that was a fantastic sticking to values. It's just a wonderful thing for Chris to do.
They have zero concept of this is the people's house. You work for the United States. You don't work for all that kind of stuff. By the way, also in COVID news, access to STI prevention, sexually transmitted infection prevention, has been very compromised by this. Clinics are reducing hours, canceling outreach. All the STI experts are being reassigned to COVID-19. Now, the rates rose a lot when they did a lot of cutting back in 2008 after the financial crisis. We don't know about this one because people are isolated and perhaps are having less sex or being less able to hook up. We don't know. But we've got to pay attention to this and use precautions, use condoms, etc.
Yes, because we don't know while coronavirus has not been found yet in semen, there's no guarantee yet. And I would also suspect sharing needles would be dangerous for transmitting the virus.
I should think so. Time out for a commercial. If you haven't filled out your census form, do it right now. Well, wait till the show's over. Go to my2020census.gov, and it takes a couple of minutes to fill out, and you will be counted. We've got to get ourselves counted.
It's so important. It has such a huge effect on government funding and distribution of congressional seats and redistricting. All of that is implicated in the census. And I am shocked by the fact that in New York 10 years ago, only 62% of the population filled out census forms. I know people are suspicious, but 62%.
How did they get people counted? I mean, they're supposed to come to your door because that's a huge issue now. But
yes.
How do they're supposed to follow up with you?
Well, it really relies a lot on human beings taking the initiative to do it themselves. And that's why we're now saying on a weekly basis, please go to this website and fill out your census form.
Well, there was an old story, possibly true, where the white census taker would go into the inner city neighborhood and go up the block and say, "Hey kid, how many people live on this block?" I mean,
yes. Or collect census forms and throw them away. If you want to avoid all that, go directly to the my2020census.gov and fill out your census form. And then you won't have to be bothered by door-to-door census takers. You won't have to be discriminated against. Nothing. Just go fill it out.
All right. The outrages don't stop coming from the Trump administration. They are set now, we have information, to finalize the Department of Health and Human Services rule to roll back healthcare discrimination protections for LGBTQ people. In the middle of a pandemic, let's cut people off. This would reverse the Obama-era interpretation of a section of the Affordable Care Act that applied to discrimination versus us by covering us under sex discrimination. When, by the way, of course, we are awaiting the Supreme Court decision, is that sex discrimination under federal law? Hospitals now are going to be able to refuse care, especially to trans people, deny them treatment. Insurance companies can deny coverage for transition-related care if all this hateful stuff goes through.
And Andy, you say in the middle of a pandemic, I would suggest they would answer, well, we've been planning to do this for a long time. It's just a coincidence that it came up now.
Well, they are accelerating a lot of bad stuff now because people are not paying attention, because all we're paying attention to is the one big story.
Well, they're continuing to focus on confirming right-wing judges to federal courts, and they are continuing to ask older federal judges who are reaching retirement age to retire early so they'll have more seats to fill.
Older Republicans. I don't know.
Absolutely, yes.
Trump has gotten 193 right-wing judges confirmed, 39 pending on the floor of the Senate. McConnell, where's this? Oh, let me give you some of the stats on who he's appointed. 85% white, 76% male. Now for Obama, that was 64% white, 58% male. The median age of appointment for Trump is 48.2. Under Obama, it was 57.2. These Republicans are very smart. Many of these have no judicial experience, and they will be on the bench for 40 years. I don't think we'll be around. Although, wait a minute, I'm 66. Dame Vera Lynn is 103, the one who sang, when the...
We'll meet again?
Yes, we'll meet again. She's 103, and she's still there. And, she had a #1 hit a couple of years ago.
And my grandmother lived to 103, so I'm still expecting 125.
Okay. When we were on last week, you had just gotten the news about Richard Grinnell. And that.
Yes. All right. I will tell you about Richard Grinnell, but one other McConnell footnote. Schumer is saying not only is he continuing to confirm these judges, he is refusing to put in place any congressional oversight of what the Trump administration is doing against the virus. No congressional oversight. That is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of.
Oh, Senate oversight, is the House doing
anything?
Can he stop the House from doing it?
I don't know.
The administration stops the House from doing it. They say, no, we're not showing up. Well, don't you know there's a crisis?
Yes, exactly. All right, Rick Grinnell. So Rick Grinnell, out gay man, pretty right-wing, ambassador to Germany, and then appointed temporary director of national intelligence, which is evidently a cabinet-level post, making him the first out LGBT person in the cabinet. Many not out people in the cabinet. Donna Shalala, I'm looking at you, and Janet Reno. But so Rick Grinnell announces that he's going to try maybe to have the United States condition sharing of national intelligence information with other countries, specifically in the Middle East, if those countries criminalize homosexuality. Now,
we call decriminalization basic human rights. Now, of course, we've just been regaling you with the way they fight LGBT rights at home.
He says that it is not enough to make a moral argument to these countries. We have to add some juice to it. Now, the problem is that you have Secretary of State Pompeo for years and ongoing refusing to take any human rights into consideration in dealing with other countries in foreign policy. And he's more powerful than Rick Grinnell. And Rick Grinnell is going to disappear from that job within a matter of months.
Is this what they call gaslighting, or am I misinterpreting that phrase?
Well, this is certainly the Trump administration has taken every opportunity to pretend that they are on our side while continuing to do horrible things like take away all LGBTQ protections in healthcare. So you take your pick who you think is telling you the truth and doing more important stuff. It's answer, not Rick Grinnell.
Agreed. But yet, the Department of Defense was allowed to go ahead with this survey of 500 troops that was commissioned under Obama and that was carried out under the Trump administration that found that LGBTQ troops experienced greater risk of sexual harassment, assault, and particularly stalking than cisgender straight service members. LGBT people are twice as likely to be stalked. Now, women of all sexual orientations experience sexual harassment, but gay and bi men face far more sexual harassment than non-gay men. 55% of non-LGBT service members reported sexual harassment, non-LGBT, and 81% of LGBT responders and 84% of trans responders did. And the sexual assault, primarily transgender, 30%, LGBT, 26%, and 14% for non-LGBT.
And here we thought the armed services were a bastion of civility.
Well, I mean, it's not like they wiped out racism when, what's his name, Harry Truman signed the order.
And not sexism either. So, no. Yeah, it's discouraging. Because in some ways they have been more inclusive, but this shows that, in fact, The treatment of people is just awful.
Okay. Should we talk about some of the people we've lost this week?
Yes. Starting with Deloris Dockrey, I think. She was HIV positive and a legendary, beloved organizer in the HIV community. Decades of work on behalf of people with HIV and a great mentor, particularly to women with HIV, on being activists and working for people's personal health, against government discrimination, whatever. She covered the waterfront. And she was most recently working for the Hyacinth Foundation in New Jersey at their wellness clinic in Newark, health and wellness clinic. And she was the messages you see about her and how beloved she was, very, very moving. And she died of the virus.
Not very old either.
No.
Seymour Kleinberg was pretty old. Now, he was the author in 1980 of Alienated Affections on Being Gay in America, which caused quite a stir back then. He died at the age of 87. He taught Shakespeare at Long Island University in Brooklyn and was a talented visual artist as well.
And Willy Jump, PFLAG mom. Tell us about Willy Jump.
Well, I've known Willy, my God, I guess I've known her for more than 40 years. That's her on the left with Amy Ashworth. Willy Jump and Amy Ashworth were two Dutch ladies who were the leaders of the New York chapter of PFLAG. And they were very, very different. Willy was the cool mom, the mother of Frank Jump, a very prominent gay activist. Frank got his mom to come with him to the 1979 March on Washington for LGBT rights. And she was very no nonsense. She was always there for us, and it was just a pleasure to be around her.
Big loss. Sorry to lose her.
Yes.
And then do we have Tom Miller next?
Sure. Tom was the executive producer of shows such as, I didn't know that he was gay, I apologize for that, but executive producer of shows such as Happy Days, Perfect Strangers, Full House, Laverne and Shirley. He's died at the age of 79 of heart disease. His partner in life and his producing partner was Robert Boyette. He said his goal was always to entertain, and he was singularly responsible for plucking Henry Winkler out of nowhere and making him the Fonz. They wanted a really tall guy and a tall
and Italian,
and they got a short Jewish guy. But
he was smart enough to realize that Henry Winkler was perfect for that part, and so he was.
And the couple moved to New York in 2000, and they produced Tootsie on Broadway last season with our friend Julie Halston.
Yes.
Right. Somebody else who died this week, Mark Milano posted this. I used to go to the Townhouse Gay Bar for older gentlemen, and they had a piano, bar there. The longtime pianist there on the Upper East Side, much beloved, Rick Unterberg. Rick Unterberg, very fun guy, has died of COVID.
And we'll get back to connecting to that, but in San Francisco at the airport, they finally opened the Harvey Milk Terminal 1 at San Francisco Airport. They were talking about this for ages. It got delayed because of the virus and the closing down of government works, but they have this corner of the terminal where they've made a whole memorial to Harvey, his whole story. People send in pictures. This is still, when it's not quite completed, they have seating there. It's like an airport lounge for gay people who don't have elevated status to get into the Delta Lounge.
It's called Harvey Milk, Messenger of Hope. And of course, Harvey used to always say, you got to give him hope, a line that former mayor Art Anyos gave him because he thought Harvey was being too negative, and Harvey picked it up and did a great job with it. JetBlue is going to be there, the first airline to require face masks on passengers and staff as of May 4th. I can't believe that there are packed flights with people without masks or anything else. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right. So Harvey Milk, but his nemesis did die this week. This was State Senator John Briggs, dying at the age of 90, who mounted the infamous Briggs Initiative, Prop 6, 1978. This would have banned gay teachers and anyone who supported gay rights. And we were down way in the polls when this was announced. That's Briggs in the background, Harvey in the foreground. But they got Jimmy Carter to come out against it. Governor Brown, of course, was against it during his first round as governor. Even Ronald Reagan said, I think this goes too far. Briggs often debated.
Well, Reagan was a huge factor in defeating the
absolutely
proposition, because his opposition as a Republican governor really turned the tide against this thing.
I think those were the days when Republicans running for president, and this would include Richard Nixon and some others, felt that they had to be okay on some of these issues if they were ever going to be president. Now they don't think that way.
Well, I wouldn't give them that much credit. I would say it probably had more to do with Reagan's Hollywood friends and the ethos in California at the time. But we don't know. The fact
Reagan
is
was not pro-gay. I mean, come on.
Well, no, but the fact is that if his circle of influence was pushing him in a particular direction.
I mean, he once observed, he saw Truman Capote out a window and he said, bring that guy in here and troll him through the halls so we can smoke out the other gays and get rid of them. I mean, seriously, that's how bad he was. Anyway, but Briggs, Harvey Milk and Sally Gearhart would debate him all the time. Briggs would claim homosexuality is a real threat to the survival of our country. And Harvey accused him not just of lying, but of opportunism. Dennis O'Hare played him in the movie Milk very effectively. Now, Briggs later in life attributed his attitudes to the times. And he said, the country shamefully neglected AIDS, but it was his bigotry that drove the pandemic.
Yes, exactly. All right. And we also lost, unbelievably, 3 trans women murdered in Puerto Rico in the last week or two. First, we have the shot of the 2 together. Where have I got this? On the left, Layla Pelez Sanchez, 21 years old, lived in the Bronx, was visiting Puerto Rico. And on the right, Serena Angelique Velasquez Ramos, 32 years old, visiting from Queens, murdered. They were found in a badly burned car. Yes, on the eastern coast of Puerto Rico. No details yet of who or why or anything, but they were the 7th and 8th trans women murdered in Puerto Rico this year. And then we found out about a 9th, Penelope Diaz Ramirez, 31 years old. She was in a correctional center. She was incarcerated, and she was killed in the correctional center.
As we speak today, they're having a press conference in San Juan. They have a Pulse memorial there. I didn't realize that about the Pulse massacre, because so many people, Latinx people from Mexico died there. And they're going to have a virtual vigil because that's all we can have these days.
Yeah.
All right.
Going back to politics for a minute, Pete Buttigieg has been heard from again. He said he understood that some people were very excited about him because they thought it was just so amazing that an out gay man could run for president. And some people, gay people, wouldn't even vote for him because they thought he was too conservative. But he understands both sides, and he just wants people not to be mean.
Well, he also said we've reached the point where gay people don't feel they got to vote for the gay candidate. It's because it's
some.
I'm just saying what he said, and he acknowledges that.
Well,
he says let's not be mean to each other.
I like the fact that he could be sort of dispassionate in analyzing this and seeing all sides of it. There are very few politicians who, after they lose, will talk about the various people who did or didn't vote for them in a normal tone of voice.
Well, speaking of voting, I think we've told you that now in New York, we're all going to get an absentee ballot application. You're going to get it in the mail, fill it out, you send it in a self-addressed stamped envelope that they provide for you, and a return envelope. But so we're all going to get to vote by mail if we want to vote by mail. But the governor basically canceled the New York presidential primary for June 23rd. Oh, we don't need it. Biden's going to win. Who cares? And a lot of other elections, special elections. This is wrong. This is going to give Trump ideas. Now, I got some pushback on this on Facebook. You're so selfish, you Bernie people. I wasn't supporting Bernie or anybody openly. But I believe people should be able to vote under all circumstances. They voted in World War II before it was over and got rid of Churchill, for God's sakes. It's just appalling to me. And what the purpose of this is for Cuomo is stopping a lot of Bernie people from coming to the polls to protect moderate House candidates who had primary challenges. So he's working out, Cuomo was on TV today saying, can we stop the partisanship with Trump and everything? Please. And then in his own budget, he's getting rid of the Working Families Party. I mean, Andrew, please. All right. And we got to
you'll be happy to know, though, that Biden spoke out about holding the November election and accused Trump of thinking about canceling it. And Trump was put on the spot by reporters and was forced to say, no, the November election will happen, no problem.
Well, if we don't move to vote by mail fast, and I read an article about this, about the company that produces the kind of mail-in ballots. They said, if you don't do this now, it ain't going to happen, because a lot of states and localities do not have the capacity, and if we don't do it now, it's not going to happen.
Well, and there are problems with voting by mail too, because we saw it in Wisconsin. People send in applications for ballots, they don't get them. Ballots disappear.
States that do it regularly do it well, and there are never any problems. There are 4 states where you can only vote by mail, which is the way it should be everywhere.
Nothing is perfect.
Some other political news, a poll in Ohio. Trump won Ohio by 8 points in 2016. Used to be a swing state. Now he's tied with Biden in the polls there. And in Florida, Biden is up 52-42. I'm not trying to get overconfident. They haven't started their campaign.
Still early.
Yes, I know. And in Kansas, now I want to say something really admiring of the Kansas Republican Party. They are trying to unite behind one primary candidate to this crazy extremist not saying something in the Republican Party, Chris Colback, because they will lose the U.S. Senate seat that is being vacated by, what's his name, Pat Roberts, if he's the candidate. So, but in the Bronx, we've got all these people running against Ruben Diaz Sr. for a congressional seat, and they can't agree on one candidate.
Yeah, but Ruben Diaz will win. Chris Colback will lose. So I'm not in favor of the Republicans uniting behind a candidate.
Of course, I'm in favor of it. I'm talking about the fact that they're smart.
Let's not let them get too smart. In a latest report from the American Library Association of the most, what they call challenged books in 2019, attempts to ban them, 8 out of the top 10 are LGBTQ themed books. 8 out of 10. The number 1 book is George, which is from a few years ago. It has a trans character. It's accused by those trying to ban it of being anti-religious, anti-family, and provokes discussion. That's what they're against. Also,
have they read the Bible?
Yes, and they think you haven't.
That's in there, and the violence and sex and everything else.
Well, they don't approve of that either. They're also, along with going after particular books, of course, they're going after drag queen story hours around the country. And one of the places they've had a big fight over drag queen story hours is in Missouri. And the news out of Columbia, Missouri this week is that another legendary gay bar is going out of business. It was the only drag bar in town, a drag performance bar, and it too has been taken down by the virus.
Well, are there going to be any bars when this is all over?
Yes, yes, there will.
You know, I saw there's a theater that's in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, that's going to open in August, and they showed you how they're going to do the seating. People aren't going back to the theater until there's a vaccine, I got to tell you.
Or remdesivir gets even better.
Right.
Also, I got one more thing here. There's a lot of talk about this new book out by Francois Clemens, who worked with Mr. Rogers. This is not a new story, but he's talking about how Mr. Rogers made him stay closeted, suggested strongly he marry a woman, which he did, and then they divorced.
It was in the movie.
Yeah, well, now he's published his autobiography called Officer Clemens. So if you want to read it.
I mean, he went along with it.
He did. Well, it was the late 60s.
Mr. Rogers said, "You think the show is going to survive if I've got an out gay guy? So I don't want to hear about this anymore."
And Mr. Rogers said, "I don't care that you're gay. You're still on the show, but please don't talk about it."
Right. And, okay. Positive news. They did manage to have a primary in Ohio. It was delayed, and Democrats in the sheriff's race in Hamilton County, the out challenger, a lesbian, Charmaine McGuffey. We have a picture. She ousted a guy named Jim Neal. She got 70% of the vote. He was a Democrat, but he went to a Trump rally in uniform. Then he tried to apologize for it, but it was too late, and the party dumped him, and they endorsed her. She filed a federal lawsuit. She was working for the sheriff's office in the county jail. He fired her for being a lesbian. She filed a federal lawsuit. Now she just got rid of him. And he said to the Democrats, "Don't nominate her. The people in the sheriff's office, they're never going to work for a lesbian."
Well, we are reminded occasionally that, in fact, the people who talk like that are a minority in this country.
Well, okay. Well, but they've got the Senate. I love this thing. The Independent Forensic Expert Group, I'd never heard of them, but they issued a stinging condemnation of conversion therapy, saying it constitutes cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment and torture, saying it should be banned as child abuse and fraud, a violation of professional ethics. And similar condemnation came from the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims, condemning conversion therapy.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left. Shall we move on to international news?
Sure. We've got a lot. Go ahead.
Yes. So I'll try to whip through some of these. In China, 2 women who were married in the U.S. and had 2 children by one woman contributing 2 eggs and then having them fertilized, and then each woman carried one of the children. Now they're living in China, they're separated, and the one who contributed the eggs has absconded with the kids, so the other one is suing for custody of the one she gave birth to and visitation with the others. This is a whole new thing for China, which of course does not recognize couples like this. So that's an interesting case, which we will follow.
In Israel, a court ruled that a print shop that refused to serve an LGBT group from a college, they said, you can't do that. The owner of the shop said, we do not deal in abomination materials. The name of the business is Rainbow Color. And anyway, the transportation minister condemned this. He says, I'm a proud homophobe and this is secular coercion.
Well, in the U.S., the print shop would have won.
Yes. Yes, they would have. But
yeah.
We have a First Amendment.
But the court in Israel said, look, you can't mix religion and public accommodations.
Well, they had a pretty religious health minister there who was very anti-LGBT. He botched the response to COVID, and he got it. His wife got it. He has resigned.
In Japan, where same-sex marriage is not legal, 20-plus companies have announced they will accept official partnership certificates from a non-governmental organization so their employees can get marital benefits. And in Thailand, we just found out the Constitutional Court rejected a lawsuit for same-sex marriage in December, saying the court said you should have started in a different court. the government is still thinking about civil partnerships.
In Turkey, President Erdogan defended the country's top Muslim cleric who equated homosexuality with disease and societal decay. But the news here is that the country's lawyers' associations condemned the cleric and said this is harmful to human dignity.
And the Human Rights Association. But I think the news is that the president said that attacking this Muslim cleric, particularly during Ramadan, is attacking the state. So once again, Trump's friends are acting like him.
Trump's best friend and role model is the leader of Hungary, and he is now pushing through legislation to end all legal recognition of transgender people by defining gender as biological sex based on primary sex characteristics and chromosomes, making it impossible to change your gender. It's a fascist state now.
We told you last week about what was happening in Morocco, where some woman went on Instagram or Twitter or something and said you should out gay men to blackmail them. Well, it turns out that story was a little skewed. The real answer is it was a trans woman who was enraged by being insulted so much online. And so she wanted to out gay men to expose societal hypocrisy. But the whole thing backfired. And now gay men are being threatened with blackmail and kicked out of their houses.
Have already committed suicide.
So it's terrible situation.
All right.
People are not very happy with the Equalities Minister in the UK, Liz Truss, because they're evidently considering the Gender Recognition Act, and she's saying things like, we will protect people under 18 from irreversible decisions, which is completely disempowering trans kids. So they're having a fight about that over there. And in Germany, go ahead.
In Italy, an anti-gay lawyer who just said in an interview, I would never hire a gay person. This is back in 2013. He was sued by a gay group for discrimination, even though it wasn't direct, for employment discrimination. And they were awarded $11,000 in damages. It ended up in the European court, and they said, no, that's fine. He was wrong.
And in Germany, they put up a new hotline for gay men who are the victims of domestic violence. There's a lot of talk about increased domestic violence in this country with the self-isolation and everything. It's a real problem.
Russian attitudes are still terrible, but they used to be horrendous. And, things are inching up slowly.
Oh, boy.
Only 18% want gay people eliminated. By that, they mean disappeared.
That's like 1 out of 5.
It goes on and on and on and on. And
Watch out. All right. I'm moving on to AIDS news. GMHC has its AIDS walk scheduled for June 7th. It will not take place in person, but it will take place online. And they will be helping people affected by the coronavirus too. If you go to ny.aidswalk.net, you can register to be a virtual walker and raise money for GMHC, or just go to the GMHC website. I'm sure you can find it from there.
Right.
And in Indiana, Indiana Wesleyan University expelled, wait a minute.
I don't have this story, Ms. Norton.
Well, it's a female student accused a male student of sexual assault and said he gave her HIV, except it turns out he doesn't have HIV.
Oh.
So we don't know whether there really was a sexual assault, but we know that charging someone with transmitting HIV when they don't have it is not a good thing. On to entertainment news.
Well, Queer as Folk is having a virtual reunion to support LGBTQ community centers on May 1st, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. Go to May Day Homestay Gay Play. I'll put that in our email. It's the 20th anniversary of the U.S. version of that show. They're supporting a network of 250 community centers called CenterLink.
The new streaming movie everyone's excited about, including the New York Times, is A Secret Love on Netflix, which is a story about two women who have been together for they were together for almost 70 years. One of them was a professional baseball player in the whole league of their own time. And Ryan Murphy is a producer of this. A Secret Love, new to Netflix, is the hot movie this week.
All right. And Ryan Murphy also has his called Hollywood series on Netflix, bowing on May 1st. It's set post-World War II. Jim Parsons is one of the stars. He says there's a lot of nudity. It's about aspiring performers coming to town. Rock Hudson is a character, but many of them are fictional. It sort of has a Scotty Bowman-like character at a gas station, working there and hooking people up. Queen Latifah is in it, deals with race issues. Jeremy Pope from Broadway.
I think it's very much built around Scotty Bowman. I think that's a very direct and prominent part of it.
Patti LuPone, Mira Sorvino, Rob Reiner's in it, Dylan McDermott. I'm looking forward to this. It looks pretty pulpy.
But it's on what? Netflix. Yeah, maybe it'll make me sign up for Netflix. That and A Secret Love. HBO is starting a new streaming service, HBO Max. And at the end of May 27th, they're going to start a series called Legendary, which is a ball culture competition series. Also, I've been watching a lot of stuff lately, of course, because I'm at home. I caught up with Rocket Man on line. I didn't like it.
Oh.
Nah, it was too weird for me. I did watch the new the movie Bad Education on HBO. Hugh Jackman and Steven Spinella are lovers in it. There's a little kissing action there. Not that I want to.
Oh, you gave it away. I'm not all the way through it yet.
Well, it's all right.
It certainly shows you what people on Long Island are like, and that's why I'm
really good. Bad Education on HBO. And Hustlers, the J-Lo movie, finally came to Showtime, and I've been waiting for that for a long time. Well, J-Lo is just irresistible. But the movie's a little disappointing. Vida on Showtime, on Stars, is not disappointing. Season 3, the last season, women in East LA who inherited their lesbian mother's bar, and they're fooling around with women too. It's really, really good, and it's just a half hour each episode. And Killing Eve, Sandra Oh and Jodie Comer finally had a real kiss, and it was great. I love Killing Eve, even though the critics are not loving this year.
And I forgot to ask you how you felt about the head of the Church of England congratulating Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the birth of his out-of-wedlock child.
Oh, I missed that.
The head of the church, of course, is Queen Elizabeth. And they used to be so uptight about divorce. But, he's going to take paternity leave, after he recovers from COVID.
Okay. And I'm still loving My Brilliant Friend on HBO, and, catch up with that.
Thanks
Bye.
for watching, everybody. We hope to be around next week.
We will.